So, with this session, we're going to conclude our business strategy course, but I don't want to end this course without touching upon one subject that is very often not part of the business strategy curriculum, but that is very much at my heart and that I think should be part of any business strategy discussion. And that is the topic of business ethics and sustainability. So in today's session, I'm going to cover why business ethics and sustainability has become so important in business leaders' strategic choices, why they can't ignore this topic anymore. I'm going to cover a couple of key issues, ethical issues that business leaders are facing. And we're going to conclude with a few theories, ethics theories, and guiding principles that should help business leaders in their decision making. But as usual, before we go into the details, we start off with a definition. And I want to start very broadly with the definition of the word ethics. The word ethics comes from ancient Greek, ho ethos, which literally means the character. So when we talk about ethics and business ethics, we talk about a question of character. And in this case, the character of the decision maker. But more formally, ethics is defined as the study of moral value of human conduct and of the rules and principles that ought to govern them. So we're talking about human conduct, so human behavior, and then about some of the guiding principles that help people in their behavior and in their decision making. So let's talk about why is it so important that we cover this topic. And a couple of years ago, the consulting company McKinsey & Company conducted some research among business leaders globally with regards to how they see societal expectations evolving. And the results were quite striking. So the first very clear indication from this survey was that expectations are changing. Societal expectations are becoming much, much more important and have become much more important over the last 5 years. And this has been said by more than 90% of the participants. And no matter if they came from public or private companies, no matter what geography they were coming from, and no matter whether they worked in small, medium, or large enterprises. And more than half of the participants said that it will further change over time. So expectations are further changing and further growing in importance. Now, which stakeholders are most influential in the decision making? It is employees and consumers. These two stakeholder groups are by far the most influential, and customers are actually gaining in influence. So over the next 5 years, which is shown here on the right side, consumers are actually becoming more important in the way companies think about and manage societal expectations. Now, top of mind are environmental concerns. So increasing environmental concern and greater demand and limited supply of natural resources, which are two topics that are closely linked, are really top of mind and are really shaping how businesses conduct their operations, conduct their business, and what society is expecting from them. Furthermore, governance issues, besides climate change, governance issues are also becoming very important. For example, corruption. So these are things that companies have to look out for as they conduct their business and as they make their decisions going forward. And finally, there is a very strong impact and influence from societal expectations on company strategy. So being asked about whether they will incorporate environmental, social, governance, ESG issues into their strategy, 93% of the participants say that they will more and more incorporate these issues into their strategic planning process. 59% say much more and 34% say somewhat more. 7%, only 7% say it's about the same or less going forward. So societal expectations matter, and they matter more and more on how people conduct their business. Now, next, I would like to cover a few aspects of business ethics that are particular issues for how people conduct their business. And Fritsche, in his book on business ethics in 2005, has defined 5 main issues in business ethics. And he says that basically these are the 5 that we have to look out for. And they're listed here. So the 5 are bribery, coercion, deception, theft, and unfair discrimination. And I'm going to cover briefly each of these 5. So the first issue is bribery. And bribery is very simply defined as the offering, giving, receiving, or soliciting of something of value for the purpose of influencing the decision of a decision maker. What this leads to is that there's a conflict of interest between the decision maker and his or her organization. And bribery is usually used to gain sales, to get a new contract, enter into new markets, change others' decisions. Bribery can take many forms. For example, cash payments, cars, services that are provided, gifts, mobile phones, like various forms of bribery. The second issue is coercion. Now, coercion means compelling someone or convincing someone by physical force, by threat, and often the threat to use physical force, which has the effect that it makes people act in a certain way that is actually against their will, and certainly against the benefit or the interest of their company. It creates benefits for those using the coercion, and it creates harm for the ones that are being forced to act in a certain way. A special form of this is extortion, so blackmailing, threatening someone maybe to disclose some information or using power over that person. Forms of coercion can be tampering, physical harm, or extortion. The third issue is deception, and that is the most common ethical transgression. And deception is defined as knowingly and willingly making a false statement or representation. So an example here could be false advertisement. So claiming that a product has certain benefits that it actually doesn't have. Effects of deceptions are that it lures persons, customers, consumers into an action that that person actually didn't intend. And it usually causes damage to the person that had been deceived. Forms of deception can be dishonest behavior, falsifying research, falsifying data, distorting data, creating misleading advertisement, or also misrepresenting a product or a service, making a false statement about this kind of service. Then issue number 4 is theft. And theft is very widely defined here. It means taking something that doesn't belong to you without the owner's consent. Now, very important, I mentioned that theft is has a very wide definition here, but it doesn't refer to losses to the competitive forces. So if all the actors play according to economic rules and one company loses out and the other company gains, that is of course not theft. I just want to highlight this here. Effects of theft is that it's a sudden change of rules in the market. So property ownership changes, and this usually leaves insufficient time for other players to take action and can cause significant harm to some people. So for example, seizure of operating sites by foreign companies. We saw this a couple of decade ago in Bolivia. So the property, the equipment was lost, and that was obviously a form of theft. So other forms of theft are conceptual property, so intellectual property as well, counterfeit products. Price collusion is also a form of theft. That's theft of buyer's money. Dishonesty in contract is also considered as a form of theft here. Cheating, overselling customers, and unfair pricing. So that's why I said pricing decisions are also part of this here. So theft is a very wide definition here. The fifth and last ethical issue is unfair discrimination. And this is defined as the unfair treatment or the denial of privileges to people because of their race, their age, their gender, nationality, or religion, or other irrelevant factors. Now, what is important here, and that is stated here clearly at the bottom, it's called unfair discrimination. We need to be aware that we discriminate all the time. When we make a job offer, for example, and hire one person over another, that is discrimination for sure, but that's based on qualification. Or when we pay out bonuses at the end of the year, someone will get more and someone will get less bonus. And that is obviously based on performance. So we discriminate based on performance. But these are acceptable criteria. When we talk about discrimination as an ethical issue here, we explicitly talk about unfair discrimination. So effects of unfair discrimination are, for example, inefficiencies. So when we hire a less qualified person because we do the person a favor over others, that is unfair, but it leads to inefficiencies because the person is less qualified. And of course, it creates a disadvantage for the person who is affected, who has been discriminated against. Forms of unfair discrimination can be favoring someone based on non-relevant criteria, making decisions based on racial or sexual or religious prejudices, and can be denial of jobs, promotions, or any other benefits. So these were some of the very common ethical transgressions, ethical issues that business leaders need to be aware and that we come across as we conduct business. Next, I want to talk about some of the solutions, some of the way of thinking about business ethics, ethical theories that help our decision making, that help us in the strategy setting process. And that also help to explain why the same situation sometimes might lead to different decisions by different people. Why some people would go one way if they face the same definition, the same situation, and other people would decide differently. And in a nutshell, before we talk about these guiding principles, just a short definition of business ethics. Business ethics is the process of evaluating decisions, either before or after, so pre or post, with respect to moral standards of the society's culture. So basically, what I want to discuss here are guiding principles that help us in the evaluation of decisions, either before, if we have to make a decision, or after, if we have to judge whether a decision was good, ethical, or bad, non-ethical. And this page shows the overview of the ethical theories that we are going to cover today. So there's two groups, consequentialist theories and non-consequentialist theories. They can subdivide it into 4 subgroups. And in total, we are covering 9 ethical theories. And these are the ones that are listed here in bullet points. But I explain them one by one. So the first group that we are going to discuss are consequentialist theories. Now, the word consequentialist already suggests that these theories look at the consequences of a decision, so the outcome of a decision. They are also called, with the Greek term, teleological theories. Teleos is the end. So basically looking at the end result of a decision. Now, again, the decision is judged or evaluated based on its consequences. And in very simple terms on this slide, well, if the consequences are good, then the act is right and it's ethical, according to consequentialist theories. If the consequences are bad, then the act is wrong or unethical. Now, the challenge is, as you can already guess from this chart, the consequences for whom? Different people might face different consequences out of the same decision. And therefore, the evaluation highly depends on who evaluates the decision. But let's go a little bit into detail. So the first ethical theory that we are going to discuss is called egoism. Now, there's a colloquial usage of the word egoism. We call a person egoistic, for example, if the person looks only after himself or herself. But in this sense, egoism is the academic term for this theory. But the meaning is very close, very similar, as you will see. So egoism is the moral standard that focuses on self-interest. And this can have different levels. It can be on a personal level, on an organizational level, so for my company, for example, or on a community level. And the example that comes to mind here, obviously, was Donald Trump's America First policy. That's an egoistic policy based on a community level, a whole country level. Now, there are two groups of egoism. One is the short-run self-interest, which is linked to the decision at hand immediately, and long-run self-interest, which is also called enlightened self-interest, which takes a longer perspective into account. And between the short-run self-interest and the long-run self-interest, maybe some of the decisions might change if you take a longer-term perspective. A note here that is important: egoism is actually reflected in market theory. So a market allocation mechanism has embedded egoism in it. So when we make a decision, we usually look after our own or after our company's interest, and are not so much interested in the interest of the other person that we are dealing with. And that is part of the market theory. And also important to note that egoist decision-making is often judged unethical by everyone except the one who makes the decision. Now, this is egoism, looking at immediately the decision and the impact on us, on our company, or on our society, or on our country. There is a wider group of consequentialist theories, which is called utilitarianism. And again, as the name suggests, the name utility is in the term. So this looks at the net utility, the net benefit that is derived from a decision across a group of stakeholders. Yeah. So the key belief here is that a decision is ethical if it provides greater net utility, net benefit, than any other alternative decision. So in consequence of that statement, a decision maker must evaluate all alternatives and then choose the one that brings the biggest net benefit. And with net benefit, we already see we mean different stakeholders' involvement. And with net benefit, we mean like, well, there's an impact on us, there's an impact on a counterpart, maybe an impact on society. And if we net the negative and the positives out, then we should take this decision that brings the highest net utility for all people involved, not necessarily for ourselves. So there's, again, two types: act utilitarianism, which looks at the specific act, at the specific decision at hand, and provides a short-term perspective. While rule utilitarianism tries to come up with longer-term perspective, it tries to come up with rules that apply to any similar situation and that guide decision-making when someone gets into a similar situation. So in summary, consequentialist theories can be short-term or long-term, and they can be narrow focus, which is on ourselves and our organization. So that is egoism, short-term egoism and long-term egoism. And if we really look at the wider community and at the net utility that is provided for the wider community, then we have utilitarianism, act utilitarianism, and rule utilitarianism for the long term. Now, a final thought on this one. There are several difficulties with consequentialist theories, and these are listed here. The first difficulty is that it is quite a challenge to foresee what all the consequences of a business decision will be. However, according to consequentialist theories, this is required to make the decision in the first place. So there's certainly a contradiction there. Secondly, consequences of decisions are often not easily measured. So for example, how do we measure if, as a consequence of our decision, someone gets injured? Or how do we measure the value of life of a person? So these are very difficult to measure, especially in economic terms. So that also makes it difficult to make a decision based on consequentialist theories. Third, even if you look at net utility for the society at large, that may cause significant harm to a few people. So an example of this one is if a government builds a road or a big infrastructure project and needs to disown some landowners. So there's definitely net benefit of the project. For example, if you build a road and millions of people will travel on this road every day, but there is significant harm caused to the families that live on this ground, maybe have grown up there for generations, and that lose their home, their family home, to this road project. And finally, similar to statement number 3, utility obtained is not constant across members of a group. So some people will benefit significantly if they travel on this road every day, for example, and others that don't travel on this road very frequently might not benefit from that same decision. So that's important to keep in mind. Now, there's another group of ethical theories which provides maybe a little bit more straightforward guidance, but is also much stricter in terms of the guidance that it provides. And this is the group of non-consequentialist theories. Now, as the name suggests, non-consequentialist theories don't look at the consequences. They are also called deontological principles from the Greek word deein, which means being or to be. And non-consequentialist theories basically say, hey, it doesn't matter what the outcome of a decision is. There is a set of rules that must be followed. And all we have to think about are those rules. It doesn't really matter what the decision is. It's completely irrelevant whether the outcome is good or not. And the evaluation, whether something is ethical or not, is based on the reason for acting and not the consequences. The first group here is rights principles. And the idea behind this is that people are granted certain moral and human rights because we are human beings. And we all have to follow those rights and those guidelines. You don't violate people's rights. And in exchange, they don't violate yours. This philosophy and this concept is attributed to Immanuel Kant, who lived in the 18th century. And he said very clearly that rules are valid irrespective of the circumstances. So it doesn't matter if there's an emergency state or whatever the circumstances are, you follow the rules no matter what. Now, going a little bit more detailed into Kant's perspective, he says an act is right if you want everyone to act in the same way in a similar situation. And it doesn't matter which side you're on. So whenever you have to make a decision, you have to look at all the stakeholders and ask yourself, hey, if I would be in their shoes, would I still be happy with my decision, with the decision that I'm about to make? Or do I cause harm to someone? And if that is the case, then, well, I wouldn't want to be harmed, so then I shouldn't make that decision. And the key statement is to treat the people as ends themselves, never only as a means to an end. So you have to respect them as human beings, and help them realize their own ends and goals. And according to Kant, there's no individual exception to these rules. Personal benefit, consequences, and result of the decision does not have any impact on moral value. W.D. Ross, a Scottish philosopher, offers a little bit an alternative perspective to Kant's. So he says, okay, there are certain duties that we have, but they are primia facie. So that means that they might sometimes contradict each other, and they might be in conflict with each other, so we have to take them at face value. And we have to decide which one is more important. Some of these are more important than others. An example here, if you make a promise to your friend to help him with moving houses, for example, and then your parents need your urgent help from you. Now, obviously you have a moral conflict here. But if helping your parents is more important, then, according to Ross, you're allowed to break the promise to your friend. There's a good reason for it, and there's a very noble reason for breaking that promise. And you can make up for it. However, there are certain basic rights that cannot be violated. And these are the 6 listed here: life and safety, truthfulness, privacy, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, and private property. So these are things that cannot be violated no matter what. Now, the last group of ethics theories that I want to discuss is justice principles. So justice principles basically say that a just act respects rights, fairness, and equality. And the idea behind it is that sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we have ethical transgressions, so we act unethically, but we can make up for it. Maybe the most complicated of these justice principles is distributive justice. But the idea behind this, in simple terms, is that, well, benefits and burdens are not equally distributed across members of a society. So some people, for example, are richer, wealthier, have it easier, have a better life, and some people have it more difficult, which is considered as unfair. But we can make up for this by redistributing something. And that's why we have taxes, for example. So taxes are a way to redistribute from maybe wealthier people to the less wealthy people. And with that redistribution, or this distributive justice, we can make up for many unjust, unfair situations that we face in our day-to-day life. Retributive justice is very straightforward. It's part of our normal punishment system, of our legal system. It's basically refers to punishment for wrongdoing. So if you make a mistake, if you violate a law or you violate an ethical rule, you can make up for it by being punished, for example, taking a jail term. But then once you finish that jail term, then justice is done. And then everything is forgotten and equal again. And you can restart from a moral perspective, from an ethical perspective. And the last one is compensatory justice. So compensatory justice is basically compensation if you have to do an ethical transgression. And the example that I had already given is disowning the land where a government builds an infrastructure project or a new road. Now, that's obviously against ethical standards because you violate the ownership rights, the property rights of a person, but you can make up for it according to rights principles through compensation. So basically compensation should be equal or better than the loss suffered. But that leaves difficulties when it's about like loss of life, for example. So how do you compensate for this one? So justice principle again are giving an opportunity to people to make up for any wrongdoing and to compensate for that in some shape or form. Now, this brings us to the end of our discussion of ethical theories. So again, in summary, these are the theories that we have discussed. And as you can see, this explains why in the same situation, some people might act differently. Take the example that we discussed about advertisement, misleading advertisement. Now, some business leaders might decide that this is okay. And that would be taken or referring to an egoist or maybe even a utilitarianist decision making. If you claim that, well, if we sell the product, if we sell more of the product, we can create employment, we do good for society, we pay taxes and so on. So you could argue from a utilitarianist, a wider society perspective, why misleading advertisement would be okay. Now, in the same situation, people who follow the rights principles and who argue from that perspective might strictly say, no, you don't want to be deceived by advertisement. And if you don't want to be deceived by advertisement, then you shouldn't do the same to others as well. That would be Kant's or Ross' perspective. So these ethical theories might help us to guide our decision making, or at a very minimum, they might help to explain why people take certain decisions. So this brings us to the end of this session and also to the end of our business strategy course. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. Thank you for following the videos. I hope that some of the content in these sessions was useful to you. I hope that maybe you can apply it in your day-to-day business life. Thank you again for watching and good luck.